Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Angel Face Magic Hour podcast. Today, we're here with my friend Megan, and we're going to be talking astrology. So, we're really excited. We recorded this whole episode a while ago, and we had complete technology errors. We recorded it during Mercury retrograde, so we're suspecting something was amok with that. So today we're here to do it again, and I'm excited to share some information with you. For me, I really like to look at astrology, but I don't know a lot about it. Like I know I'm a Gemini and that we're the best sign, but that's all I know really. So I wanted Megan to come on and like talk about just some basic stuff for people who don't really know a lot or people who are wanting to learn about how to read their own birth chart. So we're going to be talking about the natal chart, which is, Megan will explain that, but we're going to go over the different elements of that. We're going to talk a little bit about how to read your own and what that information could give you. So Megan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Megan. I live in Portland. I've known Grace for 5-6 years now?
I feel like longer,
Maybe
but
more.
I
Yeah,
don't know, a while.
a while, in between 5 and 10.
Yeah,
But
something like that.
yeah, in my normal life, I'm an artist, and then on the side, I just kind of deep dive into anything occult, with astrology being my number one focus.
Yeah, so you're really into astrology and you also read birth charts. So if people want to do that with you, they can reach out and I'll be putting your information in the show notes. So I want you to just share with us before we get started on looking at the chart and going over that. I'd love to hear just your signs, like your sun, moon, and rising, for people to kind of learn a little bit about you.
Okay, yeah, I
You just
am.
said your birthday too the other day.
Yeah,
So
my
happy
birthday
birthday.
was last week. Thank you. I'm a Sagittarius sun with a Taurus moon and a Capricorn rising. My chart's mostly fire and earth, so do with that information what you will.
And what is like your, because astrology, like we were talking about this before we started, like there's so many different things that people could study for like 1,000 years, just like one little section of it. Like what is the most exciting to you right now to be looking at in terms of the broad like outlook of astrology?
I've been focusing mostly on mundane astrology, which is just the day-to-day transits where the planets are currently in the sky, and then how they affect your planets in your natal chart. So just the day-to-day. I've been doing lots of transit readings for people, like month ahead type things, where basically I'll get their birth chart and then I'll pull up the transits and then see whatever major is happening for them. And that's something I do for myself, like at the start of every week too, just to kind of get a grip on what kind of energy to expect.
I was just gonna ask that, like, how often do you do that? So you do it every week for yourself? You look at it?
Yeah, usually on like Sunday nights.
That's awesome. So do you have
Yeah.
a specific website that you like to look at the transits, or how do you find that information?
Yeah, so I use several different apps on my phone, and then
Cool.
astro.com is where you can create your birth chart, and then you can look at the current planets in transit to your own chart on there. Or I have some astrologers that I follow on like Instagram and YouTube as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So astro.com, that's the one we just used, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at my birth chart today as an example. So please don't, if you know how to like read charts, like don't look into it too hard, please. I beg of you. But so we're going to look at my chart as an example and just go over a little bit about like, what does it look like? How do we read it? What does that mean for us? And then just see what else comes up. So let's get started. What I'm going to do, so today, if you're listening to this on the podcast, this episode, we're recording a video as well because some of this information is going to be visual. So if you want to watch the video that goes along with this, you can go to YouTube and I'll link that in the show notes too. So you can watch the video, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sharing the visuals on my screen so everyone can see what we're talking about. And of course, you can still listen to it and understand and kind of get the gist of it. But if you want to see visually what we're discussing, you can look at the video on YouTube. So what I'm going to do right now is pull up the screen share so everyone can see what we're talking about. So to begin, we're going to look, is this what we want to look at first, the chart, Megan?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so what we're going to look at is my birth chart. So as you can see, it's a circle. That's where we're going to begin. But so with the birth chart, basically it is looking at like the information of what was going on in the stars and the planets when you're born. So what you do is you put in the information of your name and your birthday and where you were born. And then they create this chart for you. So we're going to be going over the chart, and if you want to pull up your own chart, you can. We put some links in the show notes of this website that Megan recommends, and then another site if you want to pull up your chart and follow along while we're talking about this. And yeah, is there anything else you think they need to know before we get started?
No, I think that's a good opening. Yeah.
Awesome. So for me, we put in my information and then we get all this stuff that we're looking at here. So we're going to go over starting first. What should we start? Want to start with the planets, correct? That would make the most sense.
Yeah, let's start with your sun.
Okay, so there's going to be a bunch of different planets that you guys get that are connected to you. And so we're going to go over them, starting with the sun, which is the one that probably everyone actually knows. And that's the one that I only know. So I'm going to have Megan explain to us about these planets and how they're represented in my chart. So let's do it.
Cool. So yeah, like you said, the sun, usually when people ask what your sign is, they're talking about your sun sign. That has to do with the day you were born on. So you're born June 20th, so that makes you a Gemini. So would you be able to click or like point to the sun glyph on the chart, the circle with the circle inside?
This one.
With the mouse. Yeah, so that's what the sun looks like. So every planet gets a glyph, which is like a symbol for which planet it represents. So your sun is like, kind of looks like an eye, you know, it's like the circle with the circle. So your sun is basically like your ego self, like how you identify. The luminaries in astrology, the sun and the moon, those are the two brightest things that are in our sky. So usually when you're starting with looking at a birth chart for the first time, those are the first two things that you're going to look at, because those are going to be the things that have probably like the greatest pull or like impact that you could very much like see in your life. So the number right below that 29, that just has to do with the degree. So there are 30 degrees in each sign, and the sun moves one of those degrees each day while it's in the sign. So Grace is born on the cusp right before Cancer season. So that's why her sun's at 29 degrees. It's the very end of the Gemini sign, right before it moves into Cancer. So that's what those numbers mean. It's an exact pinpoint mathematically in the sky where it was the day you were born.
I didn't know that. That's so interesting. yeah, we were saying before we started, the degrees in themselves could be like a whole like life's worth of studying.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we won't go too in depth with that, but do you know how many there are total? Is there like a specific number?
Well, it would be
I
30.
don't know what
It
the
would be
math is.
for the entire circle chart, it would be 30 times 12 because there's 30 degrees in each sign and then
Okay.
12 signs in the zodiac. I can't do that level of multiplication in my head. But it's a lot.
I'll do it on my phone. I'm sure like that's not that hard for most people, but I'm not good at that kind of stuff. It's 360.
Oh, wonderful. A circle.
Interesting.
How about that?
Yeah, that it. Oh yeah, duh. And I'm not like that mathy of a person. So we forget, yeah, astrology is a science. It is like a math.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of like calculations and things involved. So that's good to know that there's 30 in each one.
Yes. So that's like a great kind of segue into your moon. If you'll kind of like move the mouse over to the moon
one?
glyph. Yeah, right there. So that's your moon sign. Your moon is like your emotional self. It's like your inner world. It's like your moon is who you are when you're comfortable with people or when you're like at your house, just being yourself. It's how you tend to yourself emotionally, and then how you like handle those emotions. So your moon is on the 0 degree, which is the first degree of Gemini. So the degrees go from 0 to 29, but that would be 30 in total. So there's no 30th degree, but it's 0 degree and 29 are the first and last.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for those who can't see, my moon is also in Gemini.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have your moon, like the very first degree of Gemini, and then your sun on the very last degree of Gemini.
Okay, perfect. That's so interesting.
That is interesting.
So that would, if we're talking about like the sun being kind of like that outward expression,
Mm-hmm.
and the moon being like the inward, like if mine's the same, what does that mean?
It means that you're consistent. I mean, that is the next step that we would take to further interpret those points would be looking at what houses they are, because on the chart, if you're watching the video, you could see they are in 2 different houses. So
yeah, we'll talk about the houses in a little bit.
Yeah. So like just like finding out where the planet is, kind of like mapping it on the chart. That's like the first step when you're looking at a birth chart, just right off the bat.
Yeah. And if you are pulling up the chart, like, and you've never seen one of these circle like graphs before, they do have it written out for you.
Yeah,
so you can
right
look
underneath
at just like on my sun is this, my moon is this, get that
Mhm.
information, and then you can start looking at the graph to start beginning to understand it visually.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started learning astrology, I didn't touch the circle chart for a couple of years. I just used like the tables as I was getting comfortable with learning what each of the planets meant, and then kind of moving on to the houses and understanding aspects. And then I started working on figuring out the circle, but it's like overwhelming looking, but it's like once you kind of get the basics down, it's like pretty straightforward. It's just a map basically.
And then what is the next planet
so the next
that we would want to look at?
Yeah, so your next personal planet, when I say personal planet, it's the planets starting closest to the sun and then moving all the way back out. So the first planet next to the sun is Mercury. So we would look at Mercury. Right in between your sun and your moon. It's the one with the little horns on it.
This one.
Okay. Yeah, that's Mercury. So in astrology, or excuse me, in mythology, astrology, Mercury was the messenger of the gods. He went in between, the Zeus and Hades and everywhere in between. He was communication. So Mercury is how we communicate. how we process information, how we think, how we analyze things. And then also maybe like thinking like tendencies or styles. Like if you're an overthinker, you know, like you would look at Mercury in your chart and see what's going on with Mercury to see what like may indicate that.
And so that's why when we talk about like Mercury retrograde, it's always about like failed communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our podcast.
Our last podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. And Mercury's also is Hermes too.
Yes.
So if you know about Hermes and also Thoth, I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, Thoth.
In Egyptian mythology. So it's really interesting, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to look at the stories and stuff connected to that and see how that would relate to you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I really have been getting into the history of astrology lately, as far as like the connections with the mythologies and, you know, numerous different places around the world, as astrology kind of progressed throughout history. And
That's so interesting.
Those archetypes really do like hold true to like a lot of what the planetary meanings mean, and also the tarot will draw on that as well.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot in the podcast, like the language of like archetypes and symbology, like and astrology is like just one example of that. Mm-hmm. So like for me, I don't know like anything about it, but I can still pick up like some information because I do have that knowledge about the symbols. So I think it's interesting. So cool. The Mercury. So my Mercury is also in Gemini.
Yeah. The thing about Mercury, as he is the messenger, you know, to the gods, he's never too far away from the sun. So in a birth chart, I believe Mercury will never be more than 2 signs away from your sun sign. So a lot of people do have the same sun and Mercury sign. That's pretty common. But you could have it in the sign before or the sign after as well. But you'll never have like Mercury in like the opposite side of that circle. That's just it's out of its orbit. So
okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So basically, with your sun, moon, and Mercury all in Gemini, it's like who you are, like how you like identify yourself, how you process your emotions and feel, and how you think and communicate are all in a very Gemini or mercurial way, because Mercury is the ruler of Gemini as well. So each sign has a planet.
I was just going to say, so I know my chart is ruled by Mercury. So that's what you mean when people say that.
Generally, yeah, they'll either mean whichever planet or sign has like the most like placements or energy focused on it, or they'll say that your chart ruler is the planet that rules your ascendant sign, which is also known as your rising sign, which we should probably talk about the rising sign too. So I'll scoot over to your rising real quick.
So which one is that?
So where it says AC, that's on the western horizon or the left part of the chart. And you have
this one? No.
Keep going. Down. Yeah. That bold, that bold line. Down. This. Yes.
Okay, everyone, it's this thick line right here.
So basically your rising sign.
Oh, I see. It's right here.
Yeah, everyone. AC, rising or ascendant or AC or ASC all mean the same thing. Okay. It's all just synonyms for the same thing. So that is where your chart begins. So when you're looking at this circular chart, you're going to start on that line. That's where your chart begins, and then the chart goes counterclockwise with the houses. So you read it
so this way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So as far as like your chart ruler, Libra is ruled by the planet Venus. So Venus would be your chart ruler, but you are definitely very like Mercury dominant as well. So you have a ton of Mercury or Gemini energy also, but your chart is ruled by Venus. So,
but Venus is also air, right? Or Libra, I mean.
So Venus actually rules two planets. Traditionally, it rules Libra, which is an air sign, a cardinal air, and then it rules Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign. So those two signs are considered like Venusian or ruled by
That's
Venus.
interesting. I definitely have had some connections to the Venusian energy, so that makes sense to me. I like want to investigate that.
Yeah, and then going like further into like the mythology, you know, it's like looking at who Venus is in mythology, who she represents. She represents love and beauty and creation and abundance, you know, like the finer things in life. Like Venus is just wanting to sit and be fanned by leaves and eat grapes in a meadow, you know, like that's Venus energy. So that would be your ruling sign. So that would make Venus in your chart an important place for you to look as far as.
I think my Venus is in Taurus.
Yeah, it is.
We'll get there, but I don't know if we're going over Venus.
Yeah, we could
But
do
for
that.
Those who are curious.
Yeah, we could scoot over to Venus. Yeah, so it is in Taurus. So whatever your chart ruler is, I believe we have like a table somewhere that we could show that, but you want to look at the planet that rules your ascendant for kind of more information into more aspects about you and points that are important in your own birth chart.
So when we talk about the ascendant or the rising sign, what does that mean in terms of like when we are born? Like, is that a certain thing was happening in the sky? Like, can you explain that?
Yeah, so the rising sign is where the sun was rising at the time of your birth. So at the time of your birth, it was at 22 degrees Libra. So the rising sign points to the eastern horizon where the sun rises. So that's that exact degree.
Okay.
And that's where your chart begins because that's where it begins. Yeah.
That's where that's where the sun began.
Yeah, exactly. It's some, you know, it's symbolic, you know, it's like that's where the sun rises. So that's where we're gonna usually start things off, you know, each day.
That's so interesting. Awesome. So Venus is this one?
Yeah, so Venus looks just like the Mercury glyph, but without the little horns on top. Venus is the symbol for Venus has been used for representing femininity in our culture, with Mars representing the masculine, you know, like which is just below your Venus and Aries. Like the Austin Powers.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Yeah, like the Austin Powers necklace that he wears. That's like that's the glyph for Mars. So it represents.
And I know this Venus is used like a lot of connected to like feminist circles and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But with that being said, I did want to say that like astrology does not need to be like gendered as far as like the male and female. It's more so like feminine energy at like yin or like receptive energy. And then I think about like the masculine energy, like yang or like active energy.
Yes. Yeah, we talked about that a couple episodes back. Just talking about how we both everyone has both aspects of feminine and masculine. So when we look at the chart, we're not like, oh, if you're ruled by Venus, like you are a woman. Like it doesn't work
totally
exactly like that. So,
yeah.
That being said, so Venus. So this here would be Taurus.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Yeah, that's the glyph for Taurus. And then there's your Venus sitting at 25 degrees of Taurus. So yeah, Venus is how you love, what makes you feel comfortable, how you create, what you find beautiful or like aesthetically pleasing to you. Venus could also represent resources or money sometimes as well.
Interesting.
So like if you have like a major shopping problem, you would want to look at your Venus, you know, or like if you're really into like interior design and you're like, where did this come from? Like you would look at your Venus. Or also people use it in like romantic astrology, which is called synastry, where you'll compare your chart with your partner's chart. And that's like the planet of love. So when you're doing like a relationship reading, you always look at Venus and Mars. Those are the two kind of like relational planets.
Yeah, and Mars like is a more of a aggressive energy. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mars is considered like masculine energy. So it's more aggressive. It's Mars is the one who puts things into action. Mars is traditionally ruled by Aries, which is the very first sign in the zodiac. That's a cardinal fire sign. So like, you know, Mars/Aries get shit started, you know? So a lot of people who are athletes or people who are really into like fitness or maybe like heavy labor type stuff, like a swordsmith or like a blacksmith or something.
Ooh,
like
badass.
Yeah, like or like war, you know, or like competition is Mars type energy. So if you're into those things, it's like usually those people have like really strong Mars placements in their chart.
I think it's like this is a whole side tangent, but I think it's interesting to think about like right now how there's all this push of people to like explore Mars and like go to Mars and like I don't know, it just feels like there's so much aggression and stuff going on in society.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are we trying to go there and like connect with this aggressive energy and like I don't know, like store our shopping materials there? Like, why are we trying to go there? I don't understand. But I think it's interesting to think about like that in reflection to like what's going on in society, like the aggressive energy and our fascination with that, like right now.
Yeah.
Just a side tangent.
No,
but
totally. I mean, especially like the United States, you know, they really they really like the martial energy. Look at our military, look at our industrial prison complex, look at the workforce, you know, it's like everything's very martial. And the thing with Mars is impatient. Mars wants results like right now. So as far as like Mars is like rapid fire. So it's like Mars doesn't care who gets hurt. Mars just wants it to happen. So
got like the negative aspects of it.
the shadow aspect. Of course,
Yeah.
every planet, every sign has, you know, light and dark aspects to it, you know, and I don't like to live in absolutes. So, you know, it's more nuanced than that. But
Yeah, but it's a big thing to think about. And even just like I know people do look at like the charts of the United States or look at the charts of certain events and things. So it would be curious to see like points in time, like what was going on in the stars, like like when we dropped the atomic bomb or something. Like
yeah, totally.
I'd be curious to see what was going on right then. And like I'm sure that's a whole field of study.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's lots of astrologers who work more with the historical significations in history. Like you said, like the United States has its own birth chart. Like every country, you can make a chart for any person, place, or thing, you know. It just kind of like sets up the chart of when that thing was like created. So
could people make a chart for like their business, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I want to do that.
Yeah, I've done charts for chart readings for people like based on the start of like a new relationship, like the day that, you know, they got, you know, married or something, or the day that they like met their partner, or like you said, the start of a new business, or you could like do a chart for like a day that you like move a new place, like, and then you could kind of,
we should do that.
Yeah. So like there's so many fun things that you can do with it. And when you do like a chart for an event, you kind of just decipher it the same way. You start with the planets, go into the houses and then the aspects, which we'll be doing with your chart in a moment as well.
Awesome. So should we look at the rest of these planets, or should we go on to the houses?
Maybe let's move on to the houses. I don't want to get like too in depth, just because of our like time constraints and stuff. And I think when somebody's just starting out with astrology, I think it can be really overwhelming. Like, I mean, I've been studying astrology for years, and I've learned new things every single day. So it literally never ends. I was listening to the Astrology Podcast that's hosted by Chris Brennan, which is an amazing podcast. It's one of my favorites. If anyone wants more in-depth astro knowledge, I definitely recommend that one. But yeah, like I forgot where I was going with that tangent.
We don't want to go too much.
Oh yeah, we don't want to go too detail
deep to overwhelm people.
Because so what he was saying on his podcast is they did some type of math, and there's no way one single person could learn everything there is to know about astrology within one lifetime. There's absolutely no way. There's just too much information. So
yeah, even if that's like your only thing you do, you still couldn't know everything.
Yeah, exactly, which is kind of awesome and magical, and why it's so great to follow like multiple astrologers and, you know, get different blogs that you read, different podcasts you listen to, buying different books, because everyone has, you know, a slightly different perspective, or will have more knowledge in a certain area that you might know nothing about, or maybe only know a little about.
Yeah, and we don't want to like get too crazy, but there is even like Vedic astrology, like a whole another form of astrology. This is like, what is it? Well, this is Western astrology, but
Western astrology.
Does it have a name?
The chart system is considered Placidus.
Okay.
So it's like right up there at the very top, method web style / Placidus. That's so there's like multiple different ways you can draw up a chart, but for beginning Western astrology, I recommend using Placidus or whole sign houses. Placidus is more calculated, where your house sizes will all be different. Like the little pie triangles that you see on the chart, they're not going to all be like the same exact perfect size. That has to do with where you are on the equator and like the longitude and latitude of where you are. So that's when like your exact birth location comes into play for it being really like that specific location you're born with that time, because it's like exactly mapped as far as the houses are set up. Whereas whole sign, it's pretty great for beginners because it's like each sign is its own house. So it's like super not super, but it's easier to look at and decipher at a glance. And like astrology in history, like back in like the Greco-Roman times, like the Hellenistic period, they would use like the whole sign houses, which is like each sign is one house. And when I say that, it's like when the planet is traveling through that part of the sky, that constellation, that's what those degrees mean. It's exactly where it is mapped in that part of the sky for you.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting. I have a lot of thoughts coming through, but I'm trying to hold them back
so I know,
we stay on topic.
Yeah.
Let's just briefly, before we go into the houses, I just want to point out here for people who are watching the video, like going through these little glyphs. So the first sign is Aries right here, correct?
Yeah.
So here we have Aries, and then we go into Taurus, Gemini.
You're like, yeah.
Cancer. Like, am I right?
Cancer.
Yeah. What's this one?
Leo.
So it's August-ish, right? Around August.
Mid-July to mid-August.
Yeah. Then we have
Virgo.
Libra. I know this one because I have this is in my chart. Libra, Scorpio.
Yeah.
Here we have
Sagittarius.
That's yours.
Yeah, that's my sun's
what we're
sign.
in right now.
It's Sagittarius season. Yeah, right now.
And then
Capricorn.
Capricorn. That's
Yeah.
both of my parents are Capricorns, and both of me and my sibling are Geminis. Just fun fact right
Yeah,
there.
interesting.
I'm born to like right around summer solstice, and my mom's like right on the winter solstice. I just think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And then this is what, Aquarius?
Yes.
And then
Pisces.
Pisces. So Pisces is the oldest sign,
That's the
and
12th.
Aries is the first sign.
Yeah.
And we're just coming out of the Piscean age and going into Aquarius. So we're going backwards
Yeah,
in the
the
chart.
as far as the ages go, those go reverse.
The opposite direction.
Yeah.
Okay, we can talk about that, but I'm gonna resist.
So I know there's so much we could talk about.
So
it's hard to
let's
stay on focus.
yeah, so I want us just to keep it a little bit more simple, but I think if anyone's interested in looking at like the symbology behind like Pisces and all that energy, I think it would be interesting to look at, just to see like where we have been and what we're like going into, and kind of like some of those ideals and like things that society valued that we're like moving away from. I think it would be interesting to reflect upon.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's look at the houses. So this is the most, I think, mysterious part to me. Like I'm like, what does this all mean? And I see so many things you're not on TikTok, but on TikTok there's like hell of astrology pages. I mean, there's even on Instagram too, but there's so many TikTok astrology, and I'll get a video and be like, blah blah blah, because my thing is in this house and blah blah, and like I don't get the meme. So I'm like, if I feel left out, I'm like, I don't know what it means when this is in my 12th house. So we're going to talk a little bit about houses, so hopefully you can understand the memes.
Yeah.
And like be able to look at it for your own chart. So are the houses in this block part here, or where are we looking?
So we're going to be looking at like the actual circle right now.
Okay.
So your chart starts with your rising sign. So Grace's is in Libra at 22 degrees. So your first house is that first little pie slice that you see. So yeah, it's below the line, because we go
this.
Because when we read the chart, we read it counterclockwise.
Oh yeah, you said that in the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
here's a reminder, you guys, counterclockwise.
And then you can see the little number 1 right there. Yeah.
Right here.
So that's like a really nice way to look quickly and see what house you're in.
So these numbers.
Yeah, so those numbers, and then the house boundaries are the lines on either side of the number. So anything that falls within those lines is going to be within that house.
And this one's thick because it's the ascendant.
Yeah, that's your ascendant. That's where your chart starts. So so that first pie slice, you have it starting in Libra, and then you have Scorpio going into it. So unless you're using like whole sign houses, they're not going to line up perfectly. So basically it's like you want to look at the number from the inside and then kind of like look out to see what falls in those lines. So you have Pluto, that's what that P is.
Okay.
So you have Pluto in the first house. So your first house, the first house is associated with Aries being the first sign of the zodiac. It's number 1. The first house has to do with those subjects. So yourself, how you project yourself, how people see you, that's all tied in with your rising sign too. Like when you meet a new person and they're like, oh, like you're so shy. And then in your head, you're like, I'm not shy. Like, why do you think I'm shy? That's your rising sign that's being projected. So it's like, you could be, you know, like this really bubbly, like exuberant person, but you may come off really shy when you first meet people. And that would be like your rising sign. That would be what you project outward to the world. Like the first house also has a lot to do with like your physical appearance too.
Well, Libras are pretty.
Exactly. So like that's like no, literally.
That's what I always hear. Like people say
Yeah,
that.
that's like that's like a thing with Libra risings, any rising
Scorpios are
sign.
sexy,
Yeah,
right?
they're hot, man. um Libra rising ruled by Venus. Venus is the planet of love and beauty. So a lot of people with Libra risings just have this like, they just have this air of beauty and like grace to them. So
Beautiful. My chart says I'm beautiful.
it does. It's written in the stars.
So what does it mean that I have, I mean, we don't have to go too in depth, but
Yeah.
briefly, what does it mean that there's a Pluto in there?
So if you think about the planets as actors and the houses as the stage, so the planet is like what aspect of you or your personality that we're talking about, and then the house has to do with like what part of your life that has to do with. So
it's whatever is like on display.
yeah, so for the first house, exactly. So the first house is like an outward house, it's where we start. It's how you put your first foot forward, so anything in your first house is going to have a lot to do with your personality and how you look. So just real quick for you, having Pluto in the first house, Pluto is a planet of Scorpio. It has to do with like death and rebirth, psychology. It's a very like emotionally deep planet. It's not superficial. Pluto likes to deep dive and like really get to the nitty gritty of things. And a lot of people who are like really spiritual will connect with Pluto a lot of the time, because Pluto also has to do with like the occult and the unknown, any mysteries, ghosts, and all that kind of thing.
And Pluto's like the furthest one away, right?
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. The Plutonian solids. I don't know why that's something that I want to think about. That's something that's come up for me like in readings like a couple of times, where they're like talking to me about investigating like those Plutonian solids, which is something I still haven't done, but this is just reminding me to do that. I have to say that. But like the those shapes, like those they're like, I don't know what they're called, but it's 5-dimensional shapes. Do you know what I'm talking
No,
about?
I'm not familiar. I haven't heard of this before.
Oh, so they're like some kind of sacred geometry type of thing.
Oh, cool.
But they're instead of it being just like a flat square, it's like 3-dimensional, but it's also moving in space at the same time.
So like multi-dimensional
shape,
kind of shape. Okay, I'm gonna have to look into that.
I just had to say that so I don't forget. But they have some kind of like significance in math or something like that, like, but there is some like esoteric connection there that I don't fully understand yet.
Interesting.
So cool, that's good to know. So then we go to our second house. So I have nothing.
Yeah, so there's no
empty.
She's empty, but you do have like a sign in every house in your chart, even though there might not be planets in it. You still have all 12 signs in your chart. So you can see that yours begins in Scorpio and then ends in Sagittarius. So Scorpio would be the ruler of your second house. So
even what does the second house represent?
The second house is ruled by Taurus, second sign in the zodiac. It is a sign. Oh, do you have that chart that I sent you? That would be a great thing to pull up right now. Yeah, here's a great breakdown of the houses. This might, yeah, this might be like what we want to look at. So
make it fully big, so I hope everyone can see it. Can you see it, Megan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's like a great breakdown of just a real quick overview of what each of the houses represent. So second house on this chart says possessions, value, worth, money. Being that the second house is, like a Taurus thing, that's more Venus. We're kind of talking about that when you're talking about Venus as far as like value, like what you find valuable. It could be like how you handle your finances. You could look at your second house. Whenever a planet transits your second house, those topics will be activated. So that's what the mundane transits that I was talking about in the very beginning of our discussion that I like to watch. I like to see where those planets are in each house, and that can kind of give you like a heads up to themes that are going to be happening in that part of your life while that planet is in there. So for example, if you have the transit Jupiter going through your second house, Jupiter's a planet of like expansion and abundance. So while Jupiter's in your second house, like you might get a raise, or you might expand your network or like your net worth, you might come into some money, like you might kind of partake some more like creative type things that wind up giving you like some sense of value or like stability.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So then we have our third house. So should we stay on here and kind of just go through them, or should
Yeah,
we go back to my
totally.
chart?
Yeah, we can just kind of list them off for our
And then everyone
audio
can
listeners.
kind of look at their own. Cool. So then we have our third house.
Yeah, so that's communication, knowledge, siblings, logic. Third house is traditionally ruled by Gemini. So it's a mercurial house. So like what we were saying earlier about like the Mercury retrograde, like we have issues with communication, we have issues with logic. A lot of like technology will like short circuit like our podcast not saving. Like that's like a third house / Gemini / Mercury kind of thing. So like each planet, sign, and house, they all have like ways that they're intertwined with each other. And there's like different ways to kind of break that down.
And then, so our fourth house.
So family, parents, security, home. This sign's normally ruled by Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. And then, do you want me to just go through the houses? I could just do that. Yeah. Okay. So then the fifth house is ruled by Leo. It's ruled by the sun. Leo is ruled by the sun. It has to do with pleasure, creativity, children, fun. Sixth house, that's ruled by Virgo, which is also another Mercury sign. It's an earth sign. It has to do with health, service, and work. So when you have, let's say like your sun in the sixth house, you could be like really into like health or like routines or like diet or exercise, or a lot of like people in like the medical field or like nurses will have a lot of like sixth house or like Virgo stuff in their chart. So then we have the seventh house, which is ruled by Libra, which is the Venus. Marriage, relationships, unions.
We're here, seventh house.
Yeah. So now we're above the horizon, as you can kind of see on the chart.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
So when we are ascendant was our rising sign. When they have here, it says descendant.
Yeah. So
what sign is that?
The descendant is the sign opposite of your rising. So your rising is Libra. So the sign opposite to Libra is Aries. So your descendant is an Aries, and more kind of like karmic astrology. They look at a lot of like your descendant being like your past life, like what you're like what you've already accomplished, or like the sign that rules your seventh is going to be the sign that you've already kind of mastered those topics.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then whereas your rising sign is kind of like what you're progressing forward as in this soul's experience type thing.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I'm still learning so much. I hope everyone is too. So 8th house, this 8th and 12th are the ones I hear about all the time on TikTok. So
yeah.
give us the tea on the 8th house. People are always
Okay.
talking about like my 8th house. I'm like, I don't know what you're
Okay, so 8th house is ruled by Scorpio, which
That's
is ruled.
why.
Yeah, exactly. So Scorpio traditionally is ruled by Mars. When I say traditionally, that's before they discovered the planet Pluto and had Pluto become the rulership of Scorpio in modern astrology, or post, like, I don't know the exact date, maybe like 18 something, I don't know. But Mars used to rule Scorpio. So Pluto has like Martian qualities, but it's totally different. It's the last planet, in our solar system. It's small, it's icy, it's mysterious. Like, we haven't been able to like physically explore it, like it's just like kind of out there and the mysterious void of our solar system. So with that being said, Scorpio in the 8th house, lots of things having to do with death, transformation, psychology, power, sex. So
that's probably why people talk about it.
Yeah.
Sex.
Yeah. So
they're like, oh, I gotta talk about this.
Yeah. So that could either be like a healthy relationship with sex, or like some place that you have like an insecurity or like maybe like a hard time with. Like for example, if you have like Saturn in the 8th house, you might have a hard time expressing your sexuality, or you might have like a core sense of shame with like such a stern, harsh planet there. But if you have like let's say like one of the benefic planets, like your Venus in the 8th house, it's like the way that you love and perceive beauty is going to have this like really like transformational, in-depth quality to it. Like Venus in 8th house is like very much the energy of like merge souls with me or I don't want it. So that's probably why the 8th house is super popular. Also, it has a lot to do with the occult and anything, like mysterious or like below the surface. Like I said earlier, like psychology, the great, mysteries, and like esoteric like knowledge is very 8th house. Mediumship. Yeah.
We're gonna go back and just look at my chart real quick because
Yeah.
I want to know what's in my 8th house.
Yeah, you have 8th house.
Wait,
so you have Venus. Yeah.
So you have you guys.
Mm-hmm. So you have Venus, your moon, and your Mercury in the 8th house.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So with those, like, with each of these things, you could look up each placement, like moon in the 8th house, Venus in the 8th house, or you could do like super specific, like moon in Gemini, 8th house. If you don't want to do the whole, kind of break down yourself, there are a lot of references out there and resources for like breaking down each one. If you're super interested in one placement, like let's say you're like, what is my 8th house Gemini Mercury all about? You can get super into that. From like a quick look at your chart and just knowing you, it makes so much sense that your Mercury is in the 8th house, because it's like you're a medium, it's like you go in between these like planes, and like you're like a seeker, like you're someone who like wants to understand, and that's like very like 8th house qualities.
All of the information.
Yeah. The hidden or like secret or like maybe even like taboo information.
Yes.
It's also like an 8th house thing.
And secret knowledge.
We're unveiling.
Okay, so here we go back at our chart of the houses. So remember, everyone, when you're looking at the houses, you're looking at the planets in them, but sometimes there's no planets in them, so don't worry.
Yeah, totally normal.
So then we're going into our 9th house.
Okay, so the 9th house, it's ruled by Sagittarius. The ruling planet of Sagittarius is Jupiter. And the ninth house has to do with philosophy, beliefs, ethics, travel. It could also be like higher education, in religion also is ruled by the ninth house. Astrology is like a ninth house topic because it's like both philosophical and it's like very in depth and like complex at the same time. Yeah, so then the 10th house, that is traditionally ruled by Capricorn, which is ruled by Scorpio, or excuse me, Saturn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. 10th house subjects have to do with social, career, authority, fame. It's like your most public house. So it's things that are like shown out to the public. So a lot of people, when they're doing a chart reading, kind of like looking into like, like what kind of career should I go in, or how should I use my talents, you know, to like most benefit me and others, like where are my natural gifts that I can share with the world, you would look at your 10th house to see, you know, where you kind of excel in your public life, or maybe where you might want to work towards.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Next we have the 11th house that's ruled by Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. Before they discovered Uranus in traditional astrology, it shared Saturn with Capricorn. So the 11th has to do with friendship and community. That's all that says, but it could also be, I think of like social media as being very much like an Aquarius subject. Virtual reality, like anything technology, AI, robot stuff is like very Aquarian or 11th house. It's all about like sharing information, like the greater community, like people as like a whole versus like the individual. It's like, how is this going to benefit everyone? A lot of people that were like activists and stuff will have like a lot of like 11th house or like Aquarius stuff in their chart. They're kind of like the rebels. They're the people who kind of question the status quo and present with like new, fresh ideas, that, which is the shift from Capricorn, which is like structure, tradition, like things we've been doing over and over and over. When we move into the 11th house, it's like, okay, where can we innovate? Where can we like cut some corners? Where can we connect? Like, what are we going to do with this information we have?
Come on, 11th house.
Yeah.
11th house.
And then, yeah, the 12th house. So that's the other like really popular one.
Yes.
On the internet right now, the 12th house is ruled by Pisces, which is its ruling planet is Neptune. Traditionally, it's ruled by Jupiter, which it used to share with Sagittarius. The 12th house has to do with spirituality, solitude, self-reflection. The 12th house is even more mysterious than the 8th house. Neptune is a planet that's like really hazy and ethereal.
I just was thinking, I always forget about Neptune.
Yeah.
Like, I completely forgot about that planet.
Which is like so Neptune, you know, like it's foggy, it's confusing. Things like dream interpretation is like a Pisces or 12th house concept. Astral projection, the Akashic records, like that's all like 12th house type stuff. It has to do with like the collective unconscious. I can't talk right now. You know what I'm saying? It's the energy of all. It's unified. It is the culmination of the energy of all the 11 signs that came before it. It's the last sign in the zodiac. A lot of people who are considered like old souls, you know, or like wise beyond their years, like they probably have some 12th house stuff going on, or people who are like really like introverted or like really like inwardly turned, or people who like solitude usually have 12th house placements, myself included.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that's so helpful. Thank you for explaining that.
yeah, totally.
So if people are looking at their houses, this is going to be more generally like, I'm trying to like word my question, like archetypally, like who they are. And then looking at like the mundane stuff, like you were talking about in the beginning, that's more like what's going on in the stars in relation to now and them and their chart.
Yeah, in reference to, the natal chart is what you would call the birth chart.
Okay. Cool. So then basically, if people want to look at their chart, they'd be able to begin to dive into any of these subjects of each house to be able to like look into those like archetypes, like what's going on for them around like identity or money or sex or whatever the subject is.
I like to think of the houses where it's like if you have like a certain question about either yourself or like a relationship or just like, the mundane transits where it's like, like I wonder why I let's say have a hard time showing my emotions, emotions. Then you would look at your moon, which is your emotions. You would look at what house your moon is in, and then you would kind of then use like the aspects, which we haven't gone into, but to kind of see what the condition is on that moon. So it's like if you have like the moon in the 12th house, you might have a really hard time expressing your feelings outward. That's going to have like a Neptunian flavor to it. So it's like you may not even like, you might have a hard time understanding how you feel, even let alone expressing it to somebody else how you feel. Or you might be someone who kind of buries things down because it feels like too hard to grasp.
Amazing. So there's so many different things we can look at. So let's briefly talk about, let's go back to my chart and talk about the aspects. So the aspects are all these crazy lines, right?
Yeah. So the aspects are the crazy
heck
lines.
Are these?
What are those?
So there's blue lines. If you're listening to the audio, there's blue, there's red, and there's green lines. So you can pull up your chart and take a look at them. And there might even be black lines. There's hella lines.
There's all sorts of lines.
Talk briefly about what this can show us.
Yeah, so the aspects is kind of like the next step in interpreting your chart after you figured out what planet you want to look at and where it sits in your chart, what house it's in. The aspects is how the different planets communicate with each other. So the lines have to do with like your planets making connections. All of the aspects are mathematical angles. So you have the blue lines, which are considered like harmonious. So the long blue lines, those are trines. And then like the kind of shorter blue lines, those are sextiles. So
I've heard about those.
Yeah. So anything that's a trine or a sextile, that's like a really easy flow of information. Trines can indicate like ease or like maybe like a talent or a gift, maybe. Like let's look at your chart real quick. So you have moon. Yeah, moon trine Saturn. Yeah, Venus trine Saturn. So with your moon trine Saturn, that could indicate that and that's in the 8th in the 3rd house. So the way that you think and feel, and then Saturn kind of has to do with like structure, discipline. It's also like the Lord of Time or like karma. So like the flow between your emotions and the way that you like structure yourself and like have like a solid foundation are like in a easy flow of energy between each other. So that's just what the lines show. They just show how those planets are communicating with each other.
So for example, if someone had like their sun and their sun was trine with something, would that be like it makes it easy for them to display that planet? Is that what?
Yeah, totally. So the aspects will kind of like it'll blend the energies of two different planets, if that makes
a
sense.
merge.
Yeah, it's kind of like a merger. So it's like, yeah, if your sun is trine like Venus or something, usually people who have sun trine Venus are naturally charming, attractive. They're usually have like an affinity for like art or determining like value. And with the sun being in that has a lot to do with like their personality and like what they relate to also.
So then what are these green lines?
So the green lines are quincunxes. That's more
What?
That's more kind of like advanced, so we might not want to go into the green.
We don't need to go into what they mean after I heard what they're even called. That's crazy. Wait, say it one more time.
Quincunx. I believe it's like 150-degree angle. I think that's the math. I have a hard time remembering all the degrees, but yeah, that's
guys, start with the basics. You don't
start with the red and blue,
the quints,
and
couplets or that's crazy.
Yeah, so the red and the blue lines are like major aspects. Squares are 90-degree angles and oppositions are 180-degree angles. So the opposition is planets that are completely opposite of each other in the zodiacal wheel. They face each other, they face off. That's like one of the harsher aspects, but if your chart was all like blue, like your life would be easy and like kind of boring. So like it's like we learn through challenges, you know, it's like we grow through like the minor irritations that we encounter every day, you know, that like kind of pushes us towards our goals and making better choices for us. So nothing wrong with a little tension in your chart. It could just indicate where you might have a harder time with something or like a difficulty. Oppositions usually have to do with having an issue of maintaining balance in those two planets or those two houses that are being activated. So it's like, but it could also be like opposites attract, you know, it's very much like how you utilize the energy, and your whole birth chart would explain that better. But yeah, and then the last major aspect that's in red here is squares, which is a 90-degree. Squares are like an irritation, like something that you might have like a hard time like coming to fruition, or like an irritant, you know. So
like those are these bigger ones, or these little ones?
No, the side ones.
These ones.
Yeah. So those are 90-degree angles. So any planet that has squares on it, it's having a difficult time communicating with the other planet that it's connected with, or more so like integrating, if that makes sense.
I'm trying to look at which ones mine are.
Yeah, so you have like Mars square Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn. So your Mars is like your will, your drive, your action, you know, going back to those like Martian qualities, and it's square Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn. So in like what those planets represent, they might have kind of like a hard time getting lifted off the ground or being put into action with your Mars. So like, yeah, Saturn square Mars could be like, you might have a hard time with like routine or following structures or like staying organized maybe. Sorry.
No, I know.
Yeah, so the aspects,
responsibilities, like being able to do things,
tasks,
consecutively. Yeah, so
the aspects just kind of tell you how those different planets are communicating with each other in your chart. And and then the last aspect is a conjunction. A conjunction just means when two planets are aligned in the chart, like within like a few degrees of each other. So
So last year, didn't we have something that was called the Great Conjunction?
Yeah, totally. So the
So
Great
that was like hella
Conjunction.
planets at the same time or something.
Well, first we had Jupiter and Saturn conjunct. That was back in like December
I feel like it
2019.
was like,
Yeah,
yeah, a while ago.
December 2019 was the Great Conjunction. That was right before like all the COVID stuff kind of blew up. Jupiter has to do with like expansion and growth, and then it was lined up with Saturn, which is the opposite. Saturn is about like limitations and structure and like holding on to resources. So when those, and they're the two biggest planets in our solar system, which just added to this great conjunction energy. So when those aligned, basically like something having to do with like our structures, it's being highlighted like really intensely.
And we're still like, that's still happening, I feel like.
We're kind
the
of
effects of it.
That set it up. Yeah, there's other like astrology going on that like points. There's like people who go into whole like depth about like the astrology of like the pandemic, which is like really interesting. With like the mundane aspects, like astrologers for years before COVID knew something crazy was going to go down late 2019, early 2020. They just didn't know what, but they knew there was going to be like a huge pressure to our structures, our you know, like the work day, that's like a structure, you know, like us having to stay in our homes, that's like a limitation, you know, like it's a contraction. So it's like they knew something was going to blow up basically, but you know, they didn't know until it actually happened. So
yeah, like what specifically?
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense, because it's like you can look far into the future with this information. It's like math. So
yeah, because it's all math. You could look up a date 100 years from now, or you could look up a
I'd
date
be scared.
years in the history, like in the past years. You know. That's a lot. Yeah,
it's too far for me to see. So I have another question. This is kind of like different question, but before, when we started, you talked about luminaries. So the sun is a star, right?
Yes.
So when we talk
it's
about
our
the
star,
sun and the moon being luminaries, is that because they're not planets? Is that how they describe them?
I suppose so. Yeah, it's like the sun gives us and everything else life, and then the moon is the closest astral body to the earth. The
moon's not a planet.
Yeah, it's like no, it's I mean, a moon is like technically like a satellite piece of space, you know, rock.
My brain.
That orbits. But you know how like the moon has like the pull on our tides, you know, and like it's the closest astral body to us. So in that it affects everything on Earth, and it reflects the light of the sun. You know, when we have new moons, that's when they align. When we have full moons, that's when they're opposite of each other on the chart, because that surface is being lit up. When we have eclipses, you know, that's when like the moon and sun pass over each other. So those are the luminaries. Those are the two like full astral bodies that we see from our vantage point on Earth in our sky.
And then every once in a while we can see Venus.
Yeah, Venus is
Mercury. I don't know if we can see Mercury.
Yeah, you can see Mercury sometimes. The thing with Mercury, since it's so close to the sun, it's highly reflective. So it could be like really hard to see or like photograph, like from like telescopes even, because it's so close to the sun and like absorbing all that light.
I think I need to get a telescope.
Oh yeah. You can see all of the planets up to Saturn. Those are considered the visible planets.
So you can't see Neptune?
Nope.
What if it's not even there?
I like
No, we
that.
feel the energy.
Yeah,
So
we feel it.
even if it's like, it's just interesting to think about, like, because we actually don't really know.
hmm
It's just pictures.
Yeah, we've had
But
like space rovers out there to take photos,
yeah,
but we've never physically seen it, you know?
but it's like these tools like astrology and stuff, that's like, it's like these things have been around for so many thousands of years before we like had science to back up like what was going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Astrology and
Well,
astronomy
this is a
were,
science, but like
yeah.
modern photographic science, I guess.
Yeah. Like their astrology and astronomy were synonymous up until like modern society. Even like Galileo used astrology. Like all of like our great thinking minds in history, like great scientists, they all used astrology too.
Yeah, even I mean like so many modern day people too. Like I
hmm
know like politicians and stuff who
Yeah,
have
definitely.
like astrologers, like Ronald Reagan had like
He had an
hell of
astrologer.
astrologers.
Yeah.
um yeah, it's so interesting to think about because I feel like it's at some point it became like this like out there fringe thing when it
Mhm.
really is like older than a lot of other sciences.
Yeah.
So there's so much like to prove it. um
Definitely.
Awesome. So now we kind of have like a brief overview of how to look at your birth chart so everyone can kind of do that on their own and start diving into whatever element of this was like interesting to them and what they want to explore. And Megan has a few books too that you recommended, so I'll put those in the show notes as well. So if
Mhm.
anyone wants to like dive deeper, and I'll also put Megan's info if you want to do a chart reading or reach out with questions or whatever. I can give your email, right?
Yeah, totally.
So before we close out, let's just talk a little bit about eclipses.
Yeah.
I know we just had one like yesterday or something.
hmm
But we've been like in, I think what people are calling like, are we in the eclipse season or did it already happen? Like, I just want you to kind of talk about that because it's something that I feel like it's one of those hot topics on, again, like the internet.
On
It's
the
like you
internet right now.
see,
Yeah.
there's an eclipse and blah, blah, blah. Like, and it's like, how do we really know what that means? I know there's like lunar and solar eclipses.
Yep.
I believe you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this one was a solar eclipse.
Yes, it was.
So let's just
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that. Um, yeah, before we close out our episode.
Yeah. So a solar eclipse, easy way to remember, it's when the sun and the moon are in the same sign. So right now the sun is in Sagittarius, it's Sagittarius season, and the new moon that we just had was in Sagittarius. So and it was conjunct the lunar node, which is what makes it an eclipse. So the lunar node is a mathematical point in our chart. The physical eclipse is, when you see the moon and the sun moving in front of each other. So every year and a half to 2 years, the lunar nodes shift into a new sign. So the past year and a half, I want to say since like maybe May or June of last year, either end of May or early June, we've been in the Sagittarius and Gemini eclipse portal or whatever. So the north node has been traveling through the sign of Gemini, and the south node, which is the opposite, has been traveling through Sagittarius. So with the solar eclipse that happened, what's the date? That was
Today's the 4th, so it
today's
was
the
yesterday,
4th.
right?
Yeah. So depending on your time zone on the West Coast, it was December 3rd at about 11:30 p.m. If you're on the East Coast or elsewhere, it probably happened like very early in the morning, December 4th today, that we're recording. So when the new moon or the full moon are conjunct, aligned, that node, that's when it becomes an eclipse. So with the sun and the moon in Sagittarius, it was next to the south node in Sagittarius, which is,
Mm.
The polarity of Gemini, which is where our North Node has been traveling. So it was the last eclipse in these two signs. So basically whatever we've been working on or dealing with for the past year and a half is coming to a close right now. With the last, finally. So we are closing out a cycle right now with this eclipse. Whatever stories you've been living the past year and a half, it's like if you haven't been making action towards like making changes, or you're feeling pressure in a certain area of your life, this is when looking at what house it's going on in your birth chart could be very telling, and like show you like the subjects that you've probably been dealing with, like, the past year and a half, almost 2 years. So with it being the last eclipse in these two signs, we are wrapping up this cycle. The eclipse portal that you were talking about, 2 weeks ago, we had a full moon. That
was Aries or something?
It was a full moon in Taurus. It was right at the end of Scorpio season. So that first eclipse in the sign of Taurus, Scorpio polarity, moon in Taurus, sun in Scorpio for that one. That was a preview into what the next year and a half, 2 years is going to look like for you. So think back.
I feel like I was like it was hard.
Yeah, it was hard.
Stop. Don't do that. I'm manifesting a new time.
Yeah. So like the past 2 weeks, like you might have had like really weird energy levels. My sleep has been fucked up. Like
I was saying that to you
I don't know about you.
Really bad insomnia.
Yeah, like people are more likely to have crazy dreams right now. Just low energy. A lot of people are feeling kind of like frantic and anxious and restless because we've been in between this like eclipse portal, which we've now just closed out with this Sagittarius solar eclipse that we have just had today. So we are coming down from that eclipse. We are moving on. Today's a good day to like kind of think about what you've learned the past year and a half, like what you've learned about yourself. Think about like where you might want to like plant some new seeds for yourself, what you want to work on. Think about what you want to leave behind, whether that's people, places, ideas, like thought patterns. For me, like the past year and a half, I've been really coming to terms with like, I guess like my energy and how I give it and how I feel drained a lot. So like my challenge has been like trying to find balance within taking time for myself as well as giving my time to other people and helping them out. So I've been feeling really socially burnt out the past, couple years. It's been moving through like my 11th and my 12th house, which is, the Aquarius and the Pisces kind of concepts that we talked about earlier. So I've been reassessing my friendships, how I process and express my, thoughts and stuff with people, and then taking more time for myself, tapping more into that 12th house energy and giving myself more solitude. So that's really
diving a lot deeper into your spirituality.
Yeah, like
the last couple years.
And the 12th house is very spiritual. So it's like I've gotten even more into, like we did spirit school together in the beginning of the summer. And then I got my Reiki certification with you a couple months ago. I've been, doing more chart readings for people and like buying more books on astrology, practicing with like tarot for like astrological transits and stuff too, like kind of working new things in. So I've been going very into like those subjects and very much like spending a lot of time with myself. And with this last eclipse, like it kind of showed me, it's like, okay, like I feel like I've learned my lessons. Like I've left a lot of people and ideas in the past, and now I'm ready to start a new chapter. Like I feel like I've been on like a precipice onto like, the next.
We're having the same experience.
Yeah, totally.
Even though our charts are like opposite, but I feel like we're like very similar.
Yeah, we are.
Like our But like yours is mostly fire and mine's like all air.
Yeah. And I mean, elementally, fire and air are opposite, so they complement each other. When you put like fire and air together, it's like air.
Bigger fire.
Yeah, you fan the flames of fire, you know, or you could blow the fire out if, you know, it could go either way. So, or it could be a fire fucking tornado, which is an amazing thing that happens in Australia a lot. You should look it up if you've never seen it. They're crazy.
Here, like maybe like
a couple months ago, or
maybe last year or something.
Yeah, so elementally speaking, you know, it makes sense. We've been kind of going through similar things and stuff.
We're on that pathway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting too that those are kind of like the themes of what is coming up. And like today, I just was editing like the podcast that's going to come out this week, and just like that was kind of the whole gist of what the podcast was about, so everyone can kind of hear that from two different perspectives, but just like awesome. Time to like reflect and see where we want to go next. And I think like that is really good and timely for like this time of year anyway, like the definitely. New year. For me, like I always feel very much more connected to like bringing in that new year feeling when it's like September. I don't know if it's just like from going to school for years, but I know also like magically like the new year is usually around Halloween, and then another traditions more around like spring equinox. So it's like we always have these opportunities to begin again, like it's so many different times, but I think this is like a really good time of year for us to do that, like because of that eclipse energy. It really helps us like move forward and like clear stuff out that might be more deeper, like rooted within us. It's
definitely
like
pulling the roots out.
Yes. Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to share with us? Any other like suggestions for people who are kind of just getting started looking into astrology? Like any recommendations for them?
Yeah. I mean, I can kind of share like my journey, what I did to learn astrology. I would love to go to the Portland School of Astrology, but it's really expensive. So I've been like self-taught.
Well, you never know, someday maybe.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to manifest that for myself. I'm like putting that out.
We're saying it on the podcast here, so
it's been released.
How about you? I'm going to go to.
So when I go to the Portland School,
yes, perfect, much better.
But like a lot of the way that I learned was just watching other astrologers, following people on YouTube, following people on Instagram. I'm in a bunch of astrology groups on Facebook, where you can post your chart and people will like help you break it down, you know, like, because we're all learning, and like a lot of people like want to help, you know. There's just like with the internet, there's going to be people who's like, oh, why are you posting this? No one cares. But then there's going to be someone who's like, oh, actually, this is really interesting. Like, can I message you? Like, I'd like to talk about your moon. Like, I've learned so much just from like connecting with random people on the internet in these astrology groups, and like seeing what they're into and getting new perspectives. And then like there's tons of books that I can recommend. I'll send the links to Grace. The Astrology Podcast that I mentioned earlier, that's the name of it. It's on Spotify, Apple, whatever. I really love that podcast. It can be like a little wordy, so it might not be like super interesting if you're just getting into it. But if you're like super nerdy and want to know everything like I do, like I love that podcast. It's so informative, and I learn so many new things every episode that I listen to that. Also, like even like as simple as like the astrology meme pages, like some of them are very on point, like, you know, just to get like a lighthearted, easy way to like kind of get this information, because like everybody learns differently, you know, like some people can't sit down and read because for whatever reason, you don't have the time, or your attention span just says
I
nope,
just also talked about this today.
Yeah.
Being able to take in information like visually or audibly.
Yeah, in different ways. So it's like people learn in different ways. There's also like courses you could take online. A lot of like the astrologers that I follow will do workshops for like the big astrological events. Like a couple of my favorites are Stillwater Alchemy on Instagram and YouTube. The guy Matthew does like really beautiful transit reports every single week. And then he does.
Is he the guy who does the signing?
No, that's Chris Corsini. Who's the next person.
I love that guy.
I was going to recommend him next. I love him too.
I like him a lot.
They both kind of operate in a similar way. They do workshops. So like they release like the solar eclipse and Sagittarius workshop that just came out. I took that right before we recorded. I did the one with Chris Corsini. And like he'll do like a general reading for everybody, just kind of saying like the mundane aspects of it, how it's like working for everyone, like on a universal level. And then in order to figure out how that transit or event is affecting you specifically, that's when you would look at your own chart and you'd say, okay, like the eclipse is in Sagittarius. Where does Sagittarius sit in my chart? Like, and then we look at that chart and then you're like, okay, so it's in my 12th house. So that's going to have to do with like spirituality and like internal work that I'm doing. That's where mine was. So, just for an example, but, yeah, I think like any way you want to learn is great. Even just like talking with friends about it, like it just, whatever makes it like interesting and like fun for you, really.
Yeah, I think what can be fun too is like looking at, if you don't have like people's like charts to look at, like you could look at like celebrities and stuff and see how that like relates. Like, oh, let me look at Kim Kardashian's chart or whatever, just to like get like kind of an idea of how those things show up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot of celebrity and like historical figures have their birth charts up online. You could just type in, like Britney Spears birth chart, and then someone has already made the chart. So you could look at it and then, go from there and see like similarities between, your chart and other people in your lives charts once you start getting more into it. And you could see like how those things kind of like interconnect with each other that way.
Yeah, it's so endless. I think for me, it's like interesting to see like these transits or whatever kind of is going on in the sky, because it's like, it really often gives me confirmation for like psychic insights I get, because I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I received. And then someone's like, this is what's actually happening in the stars based on calculations. And I'm like, oh, do it, bitch. Yeah. So it really, for me, has been a cool way to confirm stuff. But it's so endless that like I really only know a tiny bit. So this was really helpful for me to just get like more information. Awesome. And then like, definitely will look into like the houses and stuff for myself personally, but I think it will be interesting for people to start exploring if they haven't already. So again, if you guys have questions for Meagan, you can reach out. And yeah, anything else?
No, just thanks for having me again. So funny we recorded this twice, but I'm feeling really good about this. And I kind of love that we're recording this second one on this eclipse, which is closing a chapter. Like we tried to record this 2 months ago and it didn't work out, and it was during the craziness of Mercury retrograde. And it feels like really nice that we're like ending out the year, kind of like finishing that little cycle that we created and trying to make this podcast work.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I think, there's always like some kind of reason for that. So maybe this is just a better conversation. So
yeah, totally. I like to think that way too.
Yes. Amazing. Well, thank you, Meagan. And I will see everyone next week. Bye-bye. Love you.
Bye.